I think that the title Reverend is something people should be more concerned to live down than to live up to. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. We will get back to some of that, but Reverend Sharpton, in your rebuttal, would you take a moment to correct Christopher on his misconception that religion was somehow incidental to the civil rights movement?
That's all you want me to rebut?
No.
Just feel free.
Cover that, please.
Well, first of all, let me thank you for inviting me and to have this debate. It is the first time in my long career that I was not assumed to be the devil in a debate. It's an unusual place for me on the stage. So I couldn't turn down representing God and the divine in a public encounter. But I think that several things in rebutting with Brother Hitchens says. You don't have a problem with living up or down to being brother, do you?
Damn right.
I think that you made a very interesting analysis of how people use or misuse God, but you made no argument about God himself. And by attacking the quote wicked unquote use of God does not at all address the existence of God or non-existence of God. We are sitting in a room that, because of lights, we assume that there is electricity in the building. Electricity can light up a room or burn it down. It does not mean electricity does not exist because it burns the building down or that it is inherently wicked. It is how people use it. So clearly, people have misused God as they've misused other things that are possibly positive. But its existence is not in any way proven or disproven by you giving a long diatribe on those that have mishandled and misused God, because there are many that you can cite that have acted in a way that shows the goodness of God. Your book, God is Not Great, could be refuted by many that feel he is great or she is great, whatever way you relate to God. Science, to me, does not wipe away the existence of God, because science had to start somewhere. So to pick up mankind in its evolving state does not tell me where mankind began, how it became a long story of ordered steps. Well, who ordered them? Why do things follow such a natural progression? Who set the progress? And in fact, even the term wicked, if there is no God and if there is no supreme mechanism that governs the world, what makes right right or what makes wrong wrong? Why don't we just go by whoever's the strongest at any given period in history? Because nothing is wicked, because whoever's in power at the time would determine what is wicked and what is not wicked, because there's no real moral code, because there's nobody to judge that. So at one hand, we're going to argue God doesn't exist. At the other hand, we're going to call people wicked. Wicked according to who and according to what? It would be based on whoever has the power at that time. So I think that the real thing that I'm interested in, Mr. Hitchens, is to really discuss the idea of God and the idea of a supreme being, and how creatures and creation have just by some great coincidence, an unexplained scheme, follows some order that just happened by itself. Something, some force, some overruling force had to set all of that pattern in, and it continues thousands of years later. Can you give a million examples of where people have misused that, where they've distorted it, where in the name of God or North Korea or other tragedies have happened? Yes. In terms of the civil rights movement, it was absolutely fueled by a belief in God and a belief in right or wrong. And had not there been this belief that there was a right and a wrong, civil rights movement that you alluded to or that you referred to would not have existed, because what made it wrong for people to be slaves? What made it wrong for humans to be treated unequally? Because there was nobody to say that they were all equal. It was whoever had the strength. But at the end, what is refreshing is that you are a man of faith, because any man that at this date still has faith that there are weapons of mass destruction in Iraq has more faith than any religious person I know.
Very well. It's a very generous response. Do you mind if I take it in reverse order? The belief that there were weapons of mass destruction, or rather the conviction that Saddam Hussein was interested in weapons of mass destruction, you could, I suppose, describe as an argument from design. In other words, he'd had them before, he'd known how to conceal them, he'd used them several times, he seems to be prepared to risk his entire political career on the idea of reacquiring them. I would say that was not a belief that had no evidence, and I would say that anyone who treated him as if he was innocent on the subject would be a sap, actually, would be my short word for it. Second, on the civil rights movement, I expected you to be more assertive. I don't know what Dr. King's private convictions about religion were. I know that he studied Hegel, I know that he studied Marx, I know that among his very close entourage were a large number of secular socialists and communists. You know their names too. Stanley Levinson is probably the best known, but among the black civil rights leadership, Bayard Rustin, secular socialist, Philip Randolph, secular socialist trade union leader. These were the building blocks for the March on Washington, as was Victor Reuther and many others. The belief that it is illegal as well as evil to keep black Americans in subjection does not require any supernatural endorsement. It had been proved repeatedly in law and in morality and in ethics, and demonstrated in practice. The only thing that had always been consistently justified by the churches was initially slavery, the right to hold someone as a slave, biblically warranted, and the right to keep the races separate, which is endorsed by a church that, just to give a contemporary example, one of the current candidates for the Republican nomination is a member of a church, the so-called Mormon Church of Latter-day Saints, that until 1965 had it as an article of faith that the Bible separates the sons of Ham and makes them lesser. Well, I don't have to discredit a text like that because I don't think it has any authority. So in a sense, I return the question to you. Now, I didn't say that God was misused. I hope I wasn't so poorly understood by everybody. I said that the idea of God is a dictatorial one to begin with. The belief in a supreme, eternal, invigilating creator who knows what you think and what you do and cares about it and will reward or punish you and watches you while you sleep is, I think, a horrific belief. A man-made one, fortunately. I'm very glad there's no evidence for it. In case I was misunderstood, let me assert again, I think it's innately an awful belief. However, the cleverest theologian, and have been some, has never been able to demonstrate that such a person exists. It's impossible to do so. It's not possible either for me to demonstrate conclusively that no such person exists. That cannot be done either. But one thing can be done. A person who claims not to know only that this person exists, a task beyond our brain, but to claim to know his or her, I accept your correction, Reverend, mind, to say, I know, because I'm in holy orders, what this entity wants you to do, what he wants you to eat, who he wants you to go to bed with, and how he wants you to go to bed with them, what you may read, in what associations in private you may form, what thoughts you may have. That person is out of the argument now, it seems to me. We know that no one knows that. So the claim made by the religious that they know God, they know his mind, and they can tell us what to do in his name is, I think, exploded. Further, it is not argued by my side, at any rate, or by no one I know on it, that our presence here on the planet is something that is susceptible of a smooth, logical, reasonable explanation. To the contrary, we are still very much in doubt as to precisely how we came to be human and to separate ourselves from some of our common ancestors. And, we also know that of the species that have been on this small planet, in this tiny solar system, since the beginning of measurable time, of the number that were ever in existence, more than 98.9% have become extinct. A certain solipsism, I think, is required to believe that we as a resulting species are somehow the center of the created cosmos. This is not modesty, as the Christians call it. It's not humility. It's an unbelievably arrogant claim to make. But at least it makes up for the other claim we're supposed to put up with, which is, well, yes, but we're also miserable sinners conceived in filth and doomed to abject ourselves. Both of these positions are too extreme, too strenuous, too fanatical. Both of them reinforce each other in unpleasant ways, and both should be outgrown by us. Voila.
Well, I think you probably had a bad Sunday school teacher, because a lot of what you're saying is based on dogma and has nothing to do with one's belief in a supreme being. You're discussing, again, religions, dogmas, denominations, not the existence or non-existence of God. I'm glad to hear you concede you can't prove he or she doesn't exist any more than you claim that those that believe. Are you going to claim that that's God speaking on my behalf?
Hate it when that happens.
Or the devil, which you choose. But I think that, again, the basic core question of God goes way beyond any example, no matter how witty or humorous, of those that come in God's name, because it is the dictates of denominations or organized religious groups that tell you what to eat and what to wear and who to sleep with and all of that. That has nothing to do with the existence of an order to the universe that is clear and evident, that science, I think, confirms that it evolved from somewhere. That's how I relate to God. To your point, however, since I wasn't assertive enough in the first going forward, and I think one guy said that the other night in Vegas, and Mayweather got more assertive, he won the fight, so watch out on that. But I'll get a little more assertive. Dr. King's organization, Brother Hitchens' name, was the Southern Christian Leadership Conference. So there's no question that he himself saw that the basis of the movement was God-based. Did he have some socialists that did not believe in God that associated with the movement? Absolutely. But they joined SCLC's endeavors after SCLC was formed. In fact, SCLC was formed in 1957 in New Orleans, before many of them that organized the March on Washington. When Bayard Rustin, who I knew, went down south, his problem was he debated a lot with the ministers there, who was the core of that group. So to try and secularize the civil rights movement is just totally inaccurate. It was a church-based, faith-based movement. There's no question about that. And Dr. King, way before he studied Hegel and the rest, he grew up in Ebenezer Baptist Church, was an ordained minister, first went to Morehouse, then Crozer Theological Seminary, then went to Boston to study those that you have referred to. So let's not reinvent Dr. King any more than we try to reduce God to some denominational convention. And as for the one Mormon running for office, those that really believe in God will defeat him anyway. So don't worry about that. That's a temporary situation. But I think the core challenge that I would have is that I would say to you that if your argument